Welcome to another episode of Show and Tell Books. I'm Amber,
And I'm Chantel.
and today we're talking about our May book club reads Love and Gelato and I Just Haven't Met You Yet. So, May's prompt for book club was picking a read that's set in a place that you've always wanted to visit. And so we did pick Love and Gelato, which is set in Italy, and Just Haven't Met You Yet, which is set in the Channel Islands. And I'm really excited to talk about both of these books. I thought they were fun reads. So let's start off talking about Love and Gelato, which was written by Jenna Evans Welch and was published in 2016. So it's been around for a bit. I actually was surprised to know the book is as old as it is. It's a YA novel written from Lena's point of view. Her mom had just passed from pancreatic cancer, and she's sent to live in Florence, Italy, with someone who she thought might be her dad. And she's kind of reluctant to spend the summer there. And it's the story of her reading her mom's journal and learning about her mom's history and falling in love.
Full disclosure, part of the reason we picked this book is because I watched the first half of it on Netflix and I was intrigued enough to pick up the book. I haven't actually finished the show, but I need to watch the show now that I finished the book. But it was enough to bring in a nostalgia to go and visit Italy, and just I thought the book perfectly captured a YA summer cheesy rom-commy book that takes place in another country.
Yeah, I picked up Love and Gelato sometime last year from the bookshelves because I was missing Italy. I actually did my study abroad in Italy and spent time in Tuscany. So I remember walking through the bookstore with my husband one day and seeing it on the bookshelf, and I'm like, I love gelato. I miss Italy. This seems like a great read to fulfill those needs in my life. And I wasn't that disappointed. It was a great read.
I think we both gave it 4 stars too, which is kind of surprising because usually our star ratings are somewhat dependable. But overall, this one was adorable.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I wanted to point out one of my favorite quotes from it, which is where the you kind of see the title pop into the story. You know how authors will tie in the book title as they write often. The quote came later in the story, but it says, people come to Italy for all sorts of reasons, but when they stay, it's for the same two things. What? Love and gelato.
Which is 100% true. I mean, that's exactly what you think of when you think of, a quick trip to Italy or even a study abroad or whatever. But those are the two things that first come to mind when you think of Italy. So I loved that Welch tied in that aspect of Italy with her book, but also made it the title. I love when authors actually explain where their title came from and hint at it in the pages of the book.
Yeah. What did you appreciate the most about this book?
I was laughing the entire time. The main character, she's just Lena, she's so funny. And at first I kind of thought she was a bit of an airhead, I guess, in a way, or kind of dumb. I don't know. If I'm going to Italy for the summer, first of all, I don't think I would be upset about that fact like she was, but I do get her mom had just died and, all her ties had kind of gone away. But I was laughing because I was like, how do you not know who the Medici are? Or all these famous people. And then I asked my sisters who are around that same age, and they were like, the who? And I was like, okay, well, maybe obviously she's just, I guess, a typical teenager. And it's just funny seeing her take of Italy and all the historical sites and all the people and how very boy crazy she actually is.
Yeah. I really appreciated the descriptions of Florence. I felt like Jenna Evans Welch did an amazing job describing the Duomo, different flavors of gelato, and just the setting was so well described that it brought the time that I spent in Florence to the forefront in my memory. And I was just transported back in time, kind of. I remembered walking on those streets. I remembered eating in some of those restaurants that could have been very similar to where she was. So I felt like the author did an amazing job with that. And it made me curious, so many times authors have spent time in the places that they write about. Um, so I kind of wanted to know what the story was there. Like, had she just visited for a quick trip, or how did her inspiration for the location come? And in her bio, she mentions having lived in Florence, Italy during her high school years for a couple of years. So I feel like that probably lended to the authenticity of the story. She mentions in her acknowledgments that there was actually a girl she went to high school with who lived at the American Cemetery in Florence. And and so the descriptions are very realistic because she was in part writing about experiences she had personal knowledge of. And I felt like that came across on the pages.
It definitely sucks you in and makes you feel like it is a story that is happening, kind of almost like you're reading a diary of a girl who is having this happen. We 100% recommend having like a tub of gelato next to you while you're reading it, and maybe booking a plane ticket to Italy, because that's how it left me feeling, was like, okay, when's my trip to Italy? Because you are right. She does a fantastic job at sucking you in and making you feel as if you are Lena walking through the streets of Italy. The second book we picked was Just Haven't Met You Yet by Sophie Cousins. This one was published in 2021, which I was kind of surprised about because I thought it was more recent than that. But I'd kind of explain it as like leap year meets the Guernsey Literary and Potato Field Pie Society, though it's technically set on a different island. And the main heroine is like a completely rom-com, happily ever after obsessed heroine. So it's kind of fun because you see her so obsessed with meet cutes and making sure that she's open to her perfect one and then reading into everything that ever happens. But basically, she goes to one of the Channel Islands in order to reconnect, I guess, with like her past and how her parents met and tell that story. And while she's traveling there, her suitcase gets mixed up with someone else's suitcase. And obviously, she opens it trying to figure out who the person is and how to get in contact with them, and sees all the items in there are perfect for her. You know, there's a perfume that she loves and like her favorite books in there and all these things, right? So obviously, she's like, this guy is my dream guy. So it is her and this taxi cab driver driving around to different sites. She can reconnect with her past while also like talking about the man who holds the suitcase and all of this stuff. And it's really cute and fun and also really profound. There's a quote also more towards the end of the book where Laura's like, maybe life's more about carving out happy chapters than finding a single happy ending, which I thought was super profound because I feel like this is the one caveat we need to put into whenever we read rom-com books, right? Is it starts to make you only want a happily ever after, perfect meet cute, nothing wrong ever happens. And I love that throughout this book, Laura is going through the realization that that is not life. Like, things happen and you can't just only expect perfection because mess happens. Your suitcase gets lost, you end up falling for the wrong guy, whatever it is. It's not going to be happily ever after necessarily, but it's all about finding the happy moments throughout your happily ever after.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this story because it was, to me, a coming of age, not necessarily like coming in of age in your young 20s, but really kind of coming into age as what we consider like a full-fledged adult, right? I mean, right now we see it all over social media where you have 30 somethings trying to figure out their life and they're like, I'm not prepared to be a full-time adult. And I feel like that's the position Laura found herself in. And so she had to realize like where she thought she would be when she was in her early 20s isn't where she is now. And that's okay. And kind of readjusting her paradigm of what her life would look like.
I think in addition to that, I really liked, so her mom had passed away 2 years prior to this trip, which is why it was also like a chance to reconnect. And her dad had been dead since she was like 3. So she's obviously like working through some grief and missed hope, I guess, in a way of like coming to terms with who her dad actually was versus like who she thought he was or who she had been told he was. And also her mom in a way in casting different light. But I love that she's also helping the taxi cab driver him grieve because his dad has Parkinson's. So that's like a huge transition that he's also going through, in addition to a bunch of other stuff. So I loved it because you're right. It is like a coming of age during a, I don't know, quarter life crisis that, or third year crisis. I don't know, but like a mini crisis of like, am I where I wanted to be? Trying to realize like who exactly I am, who other people are in relation to that, and like, what am I supposed to do from here?
Yeah. I didn't realize until we started talking how similar these books were, and the loss of parents and
I had the
understanding
same thought.
their parents' stories. Because as soon as you started talking about Just Haven't Met You Yet, I was like, whoa, like there's so many similarities between the plots of these books.
I think it's also cute though, because I mean, you're 100% right, right? There's the whole, this is the perfect guy for me versus this is who, is my best friend kind of thing. Which one do I pick? And like coming to terms with that aspect, with also like the living your parents' love story in a way. So yeah, they echo a lot, which is funny because Love and Gelato is 100% a YA book. I mean, the main character is 16, whereas Just Haven't Met You Yet, I think she's like 30, 28, 30-ish.
Yeah.
So there's probably like a 10-15 year age gap between the two characters, and yet the plots are more or less the same. Obviously, Just Haven't Met You Yet is aged up appropriately, and I actually really liked, because one of our biggest gripes is usually when the female heroine does not act her age, and I felt like Laura actually acted her age, and same with Lena from Love and Gelato. They both responded to situations in a way that I thought were fairly accurate, while also bringing humor to things. One of my favorite scenes in Just Haven't Met You Yet, uh, Laura is on this trip for like work. So she obviously has to keep up like an Instagram presence and all this stuff. So she goes to take like a before and after picture of some cows, some famous Jersey cows. And so she goes over, hops over the fence and is like, this will be great. I'll get like a perfect Instagram shot. And then gets electrocuted slightly by the electric fence, trips, lands in mud, and then almost gets trampled by the cows. And it was just funny because like all her thoughts the entire time were like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, like this was a bad idea. Why did I think this was a good idea? And it's just so funny because I think that's so realistic.
Yeah. I felt like there wasn't really a ton of contrived content in Just Haven't Met You Yet. It felt genuine. It felt realistic. I hadn't read a book by Sophie Cousins prior to Just Haven't Met You Yet. It was one of those classic, Amber was walking down a bookstore aisle and saw it and was like, oh, this looks cute. I'm not even going to read the back cover. I'm just going to buy it. And it worked out. Because I thought it was just really well done and enjoyable. And I'm looking forward to picking up some of her other books, because I feel like she, unlike a lot of other popular book talk authors right now, does an excellent job of writing characters who act their age, like you talked about, because I feel like all of the characters in this book were acting how you would expect someone of their age to act and responding to situations in a realistic, relatable manner.
I agree. And even though like Love and Gelato was a YA book, it was fun because you knew it was gonna end up happy. You knew that like, which is my favorite thing about YA books. They're light, not a whole ton of conflict happens that's like dark and heavy and like you have to like shut the book for a little bit, right? Nothing like that happens. And so it was enough to make me want to read the rest of the series for sure.
Yeah. I also just have to say, Lena is hilarious. Like there were so many times that her inner monologue or like her diary thoughts just had me rolling, because she was witty and just so funny, and like the observations she made of those around her, just so well done. And it felt very I don't know, it just was much funnier than I expected it to be, because the story kind of started out on a heavier note with the passing of her mom. And and the uncertainty of what her life would look like now without her mother.
I think that book does really well to balance the slightly heavier grief aspect and overcoming or working through grief with her being a teenager in Italy who has no idea what the heck is going on,
Yeah.
and her comments of humor to try and help her work through it. It was just fun and light. And honestly, like probably the perfect book to introduce into like the summer season. So I really was happy we picked that book because I loved it.
Yeah.
It was spectacular.
The one thing we didn't talk about was our ratings for Just Haven't Met You Yet. So, what did you rate Just Haven't Met You Yet?
I gave Just Haven't Met You Yet 3 stars.
Okay. And I gave it 4 stars. So, like earlier when we talked about how our ratings will kind of differ a little bit, this is one of those cases where I rated it a little bit higher. Chantel is usually the harder rater of the two of us.
Yes, you are slightly more gut feeling kind of way, whereas I look at it more critically. But yes, it was cute. I really did like it.
Yeah. So I totally agree with what you said. Love and Gelato felt like the perfect introduction to the summer reading season. Just Haven't Met You Yet doesn't quite have the same summer vibes to me. It feels kind of more like a cozy fall read.
Yeah.
But both stories were super enjoyable.
So we have another video talking about our spice scale and kind of where we'd rank books. That one's mostly for contemporary romance, so we're not going to rank Love and Gelato on there because that book is a completely clean YA book. But where do you think you would put Just Haven't Met You Yet?
I had a harder time with this one because for much of the book, I felt like it was going to be in that like 2 range on our
Mhm.
spice scale. But as the story progressed and we got to the end chapters, I have a harder time like saying, "Oh, is this like a 3 or a 4?" So, what would you say?
I probably would put it at like a 3.5, simply because it wasn't as quote unquote spicy as Emily Henry's books are, in that the sex wasn't explicit. But there were a lot more like innuendos in there. So I'd probably put it at a 3, which
Yeah,
like we ranked with like Soulmate Equation or Every Summer After, things like that. I'd probably put it between a 3 and a 3.5.
yeah. I think that's fair. I I think Sophie Cousins did an excellent job of writing in the British way. So one thing I did want to know is I felt like because the author is British, and it is written set in the Channel Islands, British characters, you get that British sense of humor and the British use of language. And so if you're not used to how Brits talk, it might be a little bit more jarring just because there were British jargon, British terms that you might not be familiar with if you haven't read before.
Which I think is very valid. I think that made it like way more of like a realistic story. Obviously, it helped the author is British, but I loved it because I felt like, again, it was happening. The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society is one of my favorite movies ever. And it had a very similar feel. Not quite as classic, especially because that's a World War II-ish book. So it's more of like a historical fiction. This one isn't. This one's modern day. But I loved it. I thought it was very cute and very charmingly British.
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of how Love and Gelato kind of kickstarted our summer reading, our June book club theme is a summer book that you won't be ashamed to read at the pool or the beach or whatever lakeside, waterside location you find yourself in. So, because this one is so individualized, we are not really going to come up with like a list that you guys can pick from or things like that. But we do want to know what kind of books that you guys like to read while you are waterside. We're always looking for some summer reads, especially because I'm working through my TBR a lot quicker than I thought I was gonna. So I definitely need some more recommendations. So drop them in a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye.